when you're looking at an athlete, let's say for instance they're running linear, are you watching, like I know you're watching like movement, biomechanics, hip rotation. What are the major things are you looking at? Are you starting from the feet to the hip? Like how does that work?
The feet do they do present a lot bears its head in what the foot is doing. And then you could then, interestingly enough, look at what the hand is doing, and usually it's the opposite hand, and that's something that I've been really active in thinking about and pursuing as a coach is how can we vary the hand position to alter potentially what the foot is doing. So meaning nothing crazy, but you see kids run with different hand positions, open fist, closed fist. Something as simple as putting something in a kid's hand and telling them to hold it in a certain way. It's interesting how you see the foot react and relate differently to the ground. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily to me, I would not be the person that says like the foot is the amount of nerve endings and the necessity of it to move in an incredible way. I could say starts and ends at the foot, but I think it also presents what's happening at the hip, which is extremely necessary to see. Again, I think, so one of the things that really changed my mindset, like I had said when I was coaching that young man, to stop rotating and telling him to run straight. Terrible idea. I watched at the Florida High School State Championship in 2018, and I'm not going to mention any of the young men's name, even though it would be all great things. They're all incredible athletes, seem like incredible people. The 8 finalists in the 2A competition all happen to be future Division I college football players. 2 of them are still competing in Division I track and field, and really could be, the opportunities would be endless for them and will be endless for them on the track end. So what I saw was, I watched that from the finish line, and I saw that, I don't want to say every last one of them, because it's not always going to be to the degree that all of them do, but from where I was standing, just about all of them, you saw in almost what looked like exaggerated internal rotation of their hip, especially through acceleration. But even as present when they were at upright speeds, that was like a big switch for me. So when I then wanted to look at, and now it's then spun into so many different directions that's not always the number one thing to look for, because a kid might not be driven in the same way, and a kid might accelerate really well because they're a little bit better and stronger in external rotation, and then they tend to, and I don't want to get too into detail there, but that's a big thing that I look at. I certainly like to look at what the foot and knee is doing, because I usually can paint a picture of what the hip's doing. Shoulders, hands can also tell a great deal. I mean, you could look at any position of a sprinter's posture, an athlete's posture when they're sprinting, and usually you can, once you see it enough, and again the video analysis, once you do that enough, you could pretty much close everything off and guess what the shoulder's doing, what the opposite foot's doing, what the opposite hip's doing, just based off seeing how their body's moving through it.
I mean, that's interesting too, the hand positioning. Like, you would never really think that, like open palm, closed palm, you know, and then you said that you had them hold things in their hands. So we have like these kind of like weighted, I don't want to... Fucking egg weights? You got egg weights? Egg weights, give me a sponsor.
Is that who I'm supposed to shout out to?
No, I was just kidding.
But more or less, yes. So I've homemade my own version of those.
Did you really?
Yeah.
That's crazy. Man, get this man some egg weights, please.
I've homemade my own version of those, and it's the same concept. So the big thing in using those is, again, it's funny, like if you put the wrist in a certain position, again, the opposite, and it's not crazy exaggerated. I'm not saying that you're going to do this and they're going to automatically move the right way, but when you experiment in intelligent manner, and really the main part that I think is the most important part and biggest takeaway from that is, I'm the experimenter. The kid is probably looking at me like, why the heck do you want me to hold it between these two fingers and hold my hand like this? And they might look at me like I'm crazy, but all of a sudden they sprint and they're not thinking about everything else, you know? So sometimes it's just it's taking the intention away from it, and the thought away from it.
That's really interesting.
When you overcoach kids, it's just too dynamic of a movement and too fast of a movement in sprinting. Can't get any faster. It's just about in human locomotion. So when you're overcoaching and wordy with how you coach kids and sprinting, it can do some, I don't want to say do some harm, but certainly from a technical standpoint. So we want to take the thinking away from the kids. So if I'm giving them something, I tell them think less. So if there's PVC on your shoulders, you're not thinking where I previously would say,
I know there's too much to go around.
Previously I would say, I don't want to see the PVC rotate. Again, that wasn't the smart thing to do. Now I tell them move fluidly. I actually want to see the PVC rotate. That's something that I'm looking for. So, but generally for the athletes, in especially upright postures, max velocity type of sprint setting. So they're upright, they're sprinting at their top speeds. Generally, there is an overemphasis on horizontal forces. So through acceleration, and I think, again, this isn't really something you might coach a kid on a switch or remove and replace an acceleration from a foot strike standpoint. But when we overcoach stay low or jump out or project at this certain angle, they start thinking too much. And they, generally speaking, at upright speeds, it's a misunderstanding of the vertical forces that are necessary to maintain and really hold a faster top speed. Because we are overly front to back. From the swing of the arms to also what's happening at the hips.
So I think I seen a post you put up where it was a sport athlete and then a track athlete and the overstride that they had from the sport athlete to the track athlete.
Yeah, it wasn't me, but it was definitely...
Man, every time I see something track oriented, I think it's you.
That's funny. I think it was probably Dr. Ken Clark, who is awesome at what he does. That's probably the post that you're alluding to. And again, so now that's a perfect example. So I don't remember what those speeds were, but I'd imagine that even that field sport athlete was still moving really fast and probably fast enough to be extremely successful in their sport. It's now, again, it's okay. So in that kid that was the one that I explained was 5'6", 185, 190 pounds, our running back, one of our better running backs we've ever had. When he would sprint and accelerate, you would feel the ground shake because of how much power and force he was applying into the ground. It was incredible. Just watching guys like that and that's like my favorite people to watch to sprint, especially accelerate. It's like big running back types.
Just they're producing the force.
Such incredible forces into the ground, and that's. To be real with you, you might get in the open field, but I mean that acceleration ability is what makes them so great. So for many of those types, they probably have that over-exaggeration and over-commitment to those horizontal forces because that's what makes them so great in acceleration. And top speeds are super important, especially in a training methodology. That's why we use them, because of the forces that can be applied and the forces that I just think there's no way to mimic upright sprinting at top speeds. But at the end of the day, acceleration and the ability to accelerate is what makes those field sport athletes so great.
That's what I was thinking. Obviously you put more of an importance on acceleration. As opposed to top end speed for the sport athlete.
So here's where I have changed my thought process on that too, because incredible mentors of mine, one in particular, Eddie Grayer, was my mentor at Rutgers, and still a person that I look up to today. And his general commitment to all field sport athletes was going to be based on acceleration, primarily acceleration. And
change of direction, or
so to me too, and I know we never really got into the summer programming, but my change of direction I'm going to include in the same ideas as acceleration, because change in direction is decelerating and accelerating in a different angle. So to me, that's important to train acceleration on those days. So 100% yes, acceleration, change of direction, but not much in the top speeds is what I mean. And my change of that was, number one, that field sport athlete, the way that they were moving, I would say there's potential for hamstring pull there, hip flexor pull there, and sprinters pull because they're so incredibly fast. And, the muscle and tendon can't take the forces. Everything, it happens sometimes. But if we can kind of improve the athlete's specific technical model, whatever it may be, then hopefully we are going to set them up in a position that it's less likely that they have some of those soft tissue injuries. So, and even if, what some would say is, okay, a power running back, how many times are they going to break into the open field? Number one, if they have one, I hope they've had a dosage and, for lack of a better term, almost a vaccine of that, what they're expected to do on the field, which is an all-out burst at upright speeds. Number one, are they going to get hawked down?
For sure.
Are they going to pull a hamstring in the open field? Ideally not, but also football coaches in general, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing whatsoever, their practices are usually, think of any drill you ever did, you finish with a burst. And if you don't give a long enough burst, they get on you. So you also have to prepare them for what's to expect. Honestly, you got to prepare them, and I learned I would say I learned this especially from Joey at FAU, was like, it's more important to prepare them really, like, let's prepare them for practice, because that's where
doing the most of the work there.
Of the training stress is going to come from. And anyway, so I don't know how I got off on this, but so my change in thought was, yes, from a technical model standpoint, we can hopefully help them, set them up for a little more resilience against injury. Number one, it's a dosage of top speeds and those postures that hopefully they'll be prepared for it. But also, to me, and it's actually something that I'm starting to toy with. I think I'm going to do it right after we're done here, is looking at especially like ground contacts, and so the amount of force placed into the ground at the time and how abrupt it is just cannot be mimicked in any other way. So from a training standpoint, to me, if there's something that we can like milk the absolute most out of from and it's extremely taxing. So I'd say it's the most taxing CNS.
It's max effort.
That you can do, especially at upright speeds, that the ground contacts are just so abrupt. But if I can get that training stimulus out of that, I'm going to use it. And also, if we're going to use it, our athletes better be moving well when they're going through whatever that method is. So it's just like I want a kid to have a adequate and appropriate squat pattern. We want them to have a model that is applicable to what we want them to do on the track or on the field from upright speeds.